Hey everyone, and welcome to True Commerce's webinar about e-invoicing and how to stay compliant. Today we will be focusing on United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Belgium, and Germany. My name is Bettina Delberg, and I am Product Marketing Manager at True Commerce. Your host today will be my colleague, Michael Hoch, who is our pre-sales engineer and our e-invoicing compliance expert. But before we start, I have some practical information. We are recording the webinar session today, so you will receive the recording by email as soon as possible after the webinar. And during the webinar session, all attendees are muted, but if you have any questions for Michael, you are very welcome to use the chat function, and then we will go through the questions at the end of the webinar. So, are you ready, Michael?
I'm ready. Thank you, Bettina, for inviting me to do some presentations about electronic invoicing compliance in several countries. Also from my side to the people who have signed up to our webinar, welcome. I try to make it as interesting as possible. So let's get in. Our short agenda for today is has 4 topics. So we will explain and talk shortly about why that is important for you, what you need to consider and keep in mind. Then we directly move into the countries of interest that Bettina already has listed in the beginning in the welcome. Then some recommendations from my side, how to get started, things to be considered if you take actions on compliance towards electronic invoicing and reporting. And finally, we have some time reserved for summary and some actions we plan in the future, some activities, and for your questions and answers. So let's directly get in. Why is it important for you? Well, what we see is a trend that increases in the last years. Local tax authorities all over the globe are imposing requirements to fight the tax fraud. It started already 15 years ago in Southern American countries who have put in place activities around controlling the invoice flow and fighting against VAT fraud. But also now we see this trend swapping over to Europe. It started some years ago with Italy, but many other countries started. But it has different nuances in all areas and countries. So sometimes it starts by authorities demanding to switch from a paper invoice over to electronic invoices in the meaning of structured electronic invoices, not PDF invoices. That is what we see in Germany and in Belgium, latest trends and announcement. And then we also have more sophisticated countries who introduce a so-called continuous transaction control system. Means every single transaction of an invoice is controlled, monitored by a tax authority. And this is what we saw some years ago already in Italy, but it's coming up in Spain with nearby real-time reporting of electronic invoices for some larger companies towards the SI platform. We see an announcement for France, earlier planned for this year, but then postponed to 26. We see it in Turkey, but we also see it in Poland, who also planned to implement this CTC system this year, but now it's postponed to next year. But there are many activities around. It can also be that some qualified electronic signature in some so-called post-audit countries is demanded. We see examples in Portugal and in Spain, or we have some clearance approaches or clearance activities by the tax authorities in place. This means clearance explains that before you are allowed to send the invoice to the receiver, it has to go to a tax authority. It will be validated there. and then you get back some unique ID or a clearance code, or if you generate a PDF out from the invoice data, you have to put on the PDF a QR code. And this is things we see in Italy and what we face in the future in Poland also. And this is not something you can ignore if a company has the headquarter in UK, Ireland, or in the Nordics. It is something that if you have a subsidiary in these countries, or if you are VAT liable in the listed countries or the countries we are touching, then you have to take actions because this is a legal topic. And in some countries, it will also be enforced by putting in some penalties if you're not following the rules, but that differs from country to country. So there's nothing to select or choice. Shall I do it or shall I not do it? It is something that will become mandatory and requires your attention in the future. So let's directly get into the countries we selected for the session today. We decided to bring in the latest announcement we had in January from at the Dubai Exchange Summit about the United Arab Emirates, who have announced at the Dubai Exchange Summit that they will implement a framework and a proposed timeline for a so-called decentralized continuous transaction control exchange mandate that will come in the future. They decided to go for PEPPOL infrastructure, so a 5-corner model, if that's allowed to use in this case. They will decide for a PEPPOL PIND format, what is an international format that was added beside the PEPPOL BIS format for the United Arab Emirates in the future. The scope is planned to cover business to business and business to government transactions directly from the start. So the plans are not finally clear, but it could also be that in the future business to consumer invoices have to be reported towards the tax authorities. And as I earlier said, the decision was made that the PEPPOL network will be advised to be the delivery mechanism for the electronic invoices to the buyer. The government there says, okay, the service provider needs to be accredited and follow a certain process. That is what we also saw in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and what we see in Malaysia, where PEPPOL is used as the recommended or mandatory exchange infrastructure for these mandatory electronic invoices that the service provider have to be certified in the countries to prove that the local PIND format in this country is well settled up, prepared, and follows the regulations. Digital reporting system will be also added. Well, the purpose of this initiative is always to get more tax collected. They use the so-called PEPPOL or CTC by PEPPOL model, what we call 5-corner model, compared to the classic PEPPOL model with 4 corners. And corner number 5 is the tax authorities who are then part of every transaction when an invoice is sent and received, what is covering the CTC, so the continuous transaction control aspect in there. Further details are expected to come later. Not all details are declared, but from Q3 2024, the development for a certification process of certified and accredited service provider will be documented and launched with requirements and procedures how that can be done by service providers from PEPPOL. In Q2 2025, the publication of the invoice legislation will then come, and the rollout of schedule will be announced then end of 2025. So the phase 1 for the go live will be or is planned for starting on in July 2026, and it was drafted that the rollout will be in any kind of phases. So a typical approach, like in many other countries, will be that largest companies have to start in the beginning, and then it goes down either in waves, like in Saudi Arabia, or in phases like we have in other jurisdictions like France and Germany. So every 6 months, a new phase, or every year a new phase of additional companies who have to fulfill the regulations. The bodies, well, I used the 5-corner model and the decentralized CTC term already, but to explain that a bit what it means. So the seller to the left lower corner is issuing an invoice, hands it over to a service provider who is one of the service providers certified for the PEPL network, also certified by the local PEPL authority in the United Arabian Emirates. Then invoice data have to be transmitted to a government portal. The name is not defined yet, but this is a centralized approach then. And if they add a clearance component, there will be a response message, a so-called clearance code or a unique ID, maybe a QR code if a PDF is of relevance for submission, will be sent back, and finally has to go back very often, most likely into the seller's ERP system before the final invoice can be transported or submitted to the corner number 3 here, so the service provider access point that receives the invoice. There can be then some nuances like going up there if you have a clearance that it also, the receiving part has to verify towards the tax authorities with process steps 5 and 6 if the invoice is really cleared and known towards the government portal before it is handed over to the buyer and imported for processing into the buyer's ERP system. As I said, we are awaiting final requirements. We are in an early stage of this, but if you have a subsidiary in the in this region or in this country, then be prepared and keep it in mind that there is coming an upcoming initiative for electronic invoicing, mandatory and continuous transaction control towards the portals of the government when you are issuing and receiving invoices. So next country, I would like to explain what is of importance for you is Malaysia. It was announced already since a longer time, but it now speeds up. We have a new timeline that starts in August this year. And we also have there a model that uses pre-clearance. So the invoice has to be cleared by the tax authorities before you're allowed to exchange it. And also Malaysia says, okay, the PEPL exchange infrastructure is something that we want to recommend or want to use in our country. It is not exclusively, but it's one of the recommended infrastructures they want for exchange and CTC reporting. And it's also, compared to the last one in Dubai, there's a 5th corner that represents the tax authorities part in corner number 5. Also, Malaysia will implement the PEPL Pint format that is used, so country specific. They directly start with covering all kind of business invoices, so either from business to business, business to government, or if a company sells something to a final consumer. These transactions will be covered from the start. It is announced to not only have the domestic invoices, so from one internal inside company to another one inside the country, it is also that cross-border invoices have to be reported, what was not untypical, because we have seen that also in Italy for incoming invoices have to be reported and outgoing invoices if they go to a foreign customer. The transmission is preferred the network for the preferred for the transition is PayPal as a preferred network to exchange the invoices. Others are possible, but we are quite confident that the PayPal will be the leading network for exchanging invoices in this country in the future. And also pre-clearance will take place by the My Invoice portal. We continuously monitor latest announcement by the government. The last one was last week, where an update of the formats and regulations have been taking place. So now it becomes clearer that we have also here what we saw in the Emirates, a five-corner model where supplier invoices have to be validated towards the government portal in a kind of pre-clearance, and the response back and then can be submitted through the PayPal network or on other networks to the receiver of the invoice. The timeline was also precised in the latest announcements. So we had, I think it was the 6th of April, an updated timeline and an updated software development kit for integration purpose towards the My Invoice portal. So the first milestone companies have to face if they are larger than 20 million euro annual revenue. It will be the 1st of August 2024 to start with the mandatory exchange and reporting towards the government portals. Then from 1st of January 2025, taxpayers with an annual revenue larger than 5 million. So the limit goes a bit down and more companies have to follow these. Finally, 1st of July next year, in 2025, the mandate is fully rolled out to all taxpayers and companies in Malaysia then. So still some time left, but it's time to think about if you have a subsidiary there or if you are liable to pay tax in Malaysia, that you have to take care actions to fulfill the mandate and support it. Switching back to Europe, Belgium has also announced and finally now in February approved by the Parliament the legislation for becoming mandatory electronic invoicing country in B2B. This means starting from 1st of January 2026, B2B transactions, domestic, have to be done in a structured electronic format. The format will follow the European standards, the Euronorm 16931, what is already known from the implementation of the business to government mandate by the EU. Other formats like PDF are no longer allowed from the start date, 1st of January 2026. The scope covers all taxable persons with a VAT registration and establishment in Belgium. This means also if you are a foreign country, like coming from the Nordics and be VAT registered in Belgium, you have to follow this mandate and issue your invoices according to the new mandate. The recommended PEP transmission way to transmit the invoices is the PayPal network, what is well established already in Belgium because it is also the network where business to government invoices today are already submitted and transported. There are some platforms around like the Hermes or the Mercurius as part of this, but the future mandate fits very well into the existing mandate we have and extends it to the B2B invoice process. The coverage is all domestic B2B invoices, and as I said, the existing B2G mandate is still in place. It is more or less following the same rules, or the other way, the B2B is using the same infrastructure than Belgium is already implemented for the business to government invoicing. Digital reporting is not part of the act, but we are expecting that CTC, real-time reporting, clearance, or whatever, will come in alignment to the VIDA mandate that the European Commission plans to fight against cross-border VAT tax fraud started last year and speeding up now at the moment because of the Belgian presidency in the EU, and is planned to come anywhere between latest 28, 2030, so still some time left. But the EU always, as we know, needs some time to bring these things forward and establish all of them in the several countries. So the classic four-corner model, what everyone should know, I hope at least that everyone knows what four-corner model from PEPPOL with interoperability means, is that seller and buyer need a service provider that are PEPPOL certified to exchange the invoice. Some details are missing, but some specification, but they will come, I'm quite sure. But the outlook is also then we consider that the European Commission has announced this VAT in the Digital Age Act to control the VAT payments when having cross-border invoices. That the government portal will come to have invoice data synced between sender and receiver and verified that everything was done properly towards the payment of the VAT amounts in the future. So interesting. They start with a slight easy approach, well-established interoperability in four-corner, and switch over to the five-corner model, what is then quite easy and simple because this can be handled then on behalf of seller and buyer by the service provider of the PEPPOL. What is a good approach and the idea behind the five-corner model. So let's move on then to Germany. Germany is now really, after nearby 1 year, discussing at the point that both chambers of our government, so the Bundestag and Bundesrat, so the parliament chambers, have finally approved end of March the so-called Economic Growth Act that has one component to switch B2B electronic invoices towards electronic structured invoices, so away from the priority of paper invoices that is fully going to disappear in the future. The invoice format in Germany will also be based on the Euronorm 6931, like in Belgium. There's a protection of investments for 3 years for existing EDI invoices. So if EDIFACT, Tradercom, or other structured invoices are used at the moment, then there's a kind of protection, and it can still be used for the next 3 years under conditions if the buyer agrees. It will only cover domestic B2B invoices. So this means German company to another German company, or VAT liable in German company to a company. So there are no plans announced to cover the foreign receiver coverage for cross-border invoices when the receiver is a foreign company, or if a company in Germany receives an invoice from an outside Germany company. Unfortunately, the transmission is not regulated in the draft act, so there's no rules have been defined, like use the PEPPOL infrastructure, send it by email, or use FTP. The reason was that the ministry who has brought up the act says, okay, the two trading partners shall be flexible and agree on the transmission of the electronic structured invoice in the future in a one-to-one approach. Well, I would expect that most likely email will be then the way to exchange electronic invoices structured in the future. We have to see what other challenges this will bring. Digital reporting system, or CTC, is not announced in the act, but we know from discussions with the ministry that this is one of the next steps. to put the mandatory electronic invoicing in place to be prepared for the future VIDA initiative, where tax and invoice data have to be reported towards the VIS database then in the future. When we talk about the Euronorm 16931, what would that mean? Because the Act in Germany says, hey, every format that is compliant to the Euronorms EN 16931 is allowed in the future. So it is not limited to only one format, like in Italy, or one PEPOL format we would see in the other three examples I listed. The Euronorm is a European norm defined by the CEN organization for the EU mandate from 2014 to 2014, where the business to government invoicing became mandatory. In Germany, there are two formats who fit into or are compliant to the Euronorm EN 16931. One is the X-Rechnungsformat that you today should send to government authorities in most states in Germany, or it can be the Zugpferd format in current version 2.x or 2.3, I think is the latest one, in the profile comfort that is compliant to the EN 16931. Generally, it would also be possible to use the PEPOL BIS format if it consists or contains also the country-specific extension in Germany that are needed to have a legal invoice being sent out and fulfills all mandatory fields. But the format is prepared for it. It could be used, but Germany is not so, how shall I say, feeling comfortable with PEPOL today. Maybe that changes in the future and it becomes more popular. I would appreciate it because we have many customers connected through our PEPOL access point. But generally, these formats, and to be fair, all other compliant formats to that norm that will maybe come in the future are allowed for sending and receiving. As I said, transmitting the invoice in B2B is not regulated. So there will be from sender towards receiver an agreement or an adjustment. Hey, how shall we do it? It's one-to-one. By email, shall we use AS2 FTP? Do we have a WAN connection? Shall we use PEPOL? That can be some negotiation, but I would think and expect heavily that email will be the most often used way to exchange invoices in this kind. The roadmap is defined that we have the Act in March agreed, so the law is in place. The 1st of January, it starts with milestone 1, that every company has to be prepared for receiving and processing electronic invoices who are according who fulfill the compliance to the norm. From 1st of January 2027, every company in Germany that has a larger annual revenue than 800,000 euros has to issue invoices to other companies only in the structured electronic format. Finally, that ends on 1st of January 2028. Or proceeds with a mandate for all companies to issue invoices only in the EN compliant format in the future. And we have to see how that has an additional impact then if we await the continuous transaction and reporting mandates that are enforced by the European Commission with the VIDA. What does that mean? A bit more detailed. Transition to over the next 3 years means paper invoice is transitionally allowed in 2025 and 2026. From 2027 only for smaller companies when issuing, not any longer in 28. The EN 16931 structured electronic invoice format is fully allowed from 2025 and in the future, and is the finally main format, or the from 2028 the only format that is allowed to be used. Other formats have a certain conditional allowance over the following years. There are two main messages I would give you over, like, consider every company must be ready to receive electronic invoices from 1st of January 2025. So as a receiver of an invoice, you are not allowed to reject these electronic invoices anymore. Like you had some possibilities earlier by, oh, I don't want to have a PDF rejected. That's not possible anymore. And if you want to save some money as a company when issuing invoices and switch over from paper to electronic invoice, you are allowed to issue directly from 1st of January every invoice to another company in an electronic way, and the receiver is not allowed to reject that anymore. So if you want to save money from 1st of January, then switch over to electronic invoices directly from that date. That is what it is. Well, we plan to have another webinar with more details on the German mandate in May. I think it is the 16th. Bettina will bring that up at the end of the session. That explains the possibilities and what to be prepared even more detailed. So if you're interested in getting more infos and an even deeper understanding about the German mandate, then consider to sign up for our next webinar on in May 16th. Yeah, well, finally to the end, how to get prepared. We have a checklist, and as soon as you say, hey, I'm not sure about one of these answers or answers to the questions, or, well, no, then feel free to contact us. We can guide you and support you. Call in for a talk and we can go through that. So in the area of rules, are you aware of the latest CTC and e-invoicing rules in various countries related to VAT or other laws? If you don't know if you have to follow and be mandated to do so, then feel free to give us a call and agree on a talk. If you are not confident about if your invoicing is compliant to all kind of jurisdictions around VAT, if you are now falling into the mandate or not, then the same. What impact does this have if we are moving towards a CTC mandate? How does it impact your accounts receivable and accounts payable processes, or your reporting processes? Then feel free to contact us. And finally, are you aware of all the updates that are coming in? We saw quite often that there have been twice a year updates on formats, latest extensions of mandates, like in Italy, initially only for domestic, and then later there have been reporting needs for foreign invoices, so to say. And if you are not sure about that, then feel free to contact us or get in contact with us to get some further recommendations or discussion on that. Our solution, at least in our managed service approach, would fulfill the compliant e-invoicing mandates in several countries that we have today or come up in the future. It will help you to connect once from all kind of regions you have or various different ERP systems to our cloud-based integration platform. We are not only focusing as TrueCommerce on doing electronic invoices, we still, and that's what we do since over 40 years, do EDI, so Edifact, TraderCom and other towards your customers, towards your suppliers, or to any kind of portals where you need to exchange data to. So we are providing an e-invoice and EDI solution to our customers. So a bit over time, apologize for that. Are we having any questions, Bettina, we can answer?
Yes, we have received one question. It is, can I still send invoices in PDF after the 1st of January 2025 in Germany?
Yeah, that is if it's a PDF only and not a Zugpferd with embedded XML, then you are still allowed, but the receiver has to agree. The receiver has to reject, has the possibility and the allowance to reject PDF invoices from 1st of January 2025 and ask you to send either paper or structured electronic invoice according to the EN 16931. That is quite often asked. That is a very good question, because if I do consulting with customers, they say, hey, electronic PDF, does that fit? Well, the law directly says the PDF is not any longer seen as electronic invoice. It's another kind of invoice, but it's not structured, and in the future only structured electronic invoices like an XML JSON format is allowed in electronic invoicing in the German B2B area in the future. Yeah, okay, so then if no more questions left, then thank you for inviting me, Bettina.
Thank you very much, Michael, for giving us an update on the requirements and timelines in these 4 countries.